I drive my car up to the lake as if there's someone to awake. I haven't been to bed for days, I live in a twilight haze. I set my heart to the setting sun, and I hope that no one else has done it, and the drinks are never far. Open up the bar. I miss you every single day. I wait until the stars go away. I hate the way
But it's nice. Have you been on any other podcasts?
No.
No. Cool. This is your first.
Yeah, this is my first.
Nice one. Well, welcome to the Pilgrim Espresso Bar podcast. And Kezia, is it your business? Like, is it fair to say it's your business, Brix Therapy?
Yep. Brix Therapy is my business. Yeah.
Yep. And so let's just begin with So Brix Therapy is a Lego-based therapy for children with mainly autism.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yep. So that's a big part of what I do. It's probably mostly what I do is Lego therapy, but I also do some kind of counselling type talking therapy.
Yeah.
So and that's with not necessarily just autism, but with anybody.
Cool. And how did you get into it? Tell us about yourself. Like, you have studied at uni somewhere. What were you studying?
Yeah.
Because, like, your parents must have thought, far out, Kezia's off to university, and then you come out and you're playing with Lego.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the deal? How did this happen?
So I didn't start with Lego. I started as a social worker.
Yeah.
So I still am a social worker.
Yep.
So I went to UC, did all of the training to become a social worker, which was like 4 years long. And then I went into the hospital system.
Oh, yeah.
So I worked for specialist mental health.
Yep.
For a couple of years, and tried a few different teams. So did a bit of a stint on the eating disorders ward as a social worker.
Yep.
In the adults mental health team, and then I went to youth and children, and that's when I started doing a bit of Lego. I did the trainings through the hospital, and I was like, oh, this is awesome.
Cool.
This is so cool.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really the right fit for the hospital system.
Right, I see. Yeah.
Because you're seeing a lot of like children and youth who are in crisis, and in fairness, if you pull out a Lego kit and say, hey, let's crack on with this.
Yeah, they're like, what the...
They're like, this isn't enough, you know?
Yeah.
So, that's how I started doing it. I started doing it like one afternoon a week, and then it's just grown and grown, and now I do it full time. Yeah.
So what is it about Lego that kind of how does that integrate into a counselling session? Like, because you do different types of counselling sessions, one-on-ones or little group ones. And how does it work? Because tell us.
Yeah. So Lego can be used in lots of different ways. The way that I use it is I follow the kind of manual of Dr. Baron Cohen, who's actually, weirdly enough, the actor who plays Borat's brother. He's a leading researcher in autism and Lego-based therapy, which is crazy.
That is.
Yeah, Baron Cohen's quite a specific name, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, that explains they've got a lot of brains, that family.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, one's gone comedy and one's gone, academic.
Yeah. Hey, Milton, could you turn off the refrigerators?
Oh,
sorry. Continue. That is fascinating. I wonder if his brother ever has to get him doing some therapy just to chill out. He seems quite high level.
He does seem pretty intense. I
bet they've got some good stories as growing up as kids.
Yeah. So him and there's another doctor, Dr. Legoff, who have kind of manualised it and put it out there. So it came about because in their clinic room they would notice that they were seeing young people with autism, and they would notice that in the waiting room the young people would connect better in the waiting room playing with Lego, and then they'd get into the clinic room and shut down. So
Yeah.
they could see it in real life how helpful it was. But so essentially, I follow the manual, in particularly with the group-based therapy. So in a group, we have 3 people. We all have a different role. So there's an engineer who's got the instructions of the Lego kit, and they don't show anybody else what's on front of the book. So if you open up a Lego kit, there's all the Lego, and then there's a manual. You take the manual out, the engineer's got it in front of them, so you wouldn't be able to see it. Milton wouldn't be able to see what's inside it.
Yeah.
And I'd be telling you guys how to build the Lego set. So say Milton was the supplier, I'd tell Milton what to find. So Milton, can you find a 4x4 yellow brick?
Yep.
And then I'd tell you as the builder how to make it. So can you put the brick on the white brick? And if you're building a massive set, you can imagine how hard that is.
Yes.
So it relies on social communication. And for people with autism, that can be really difficult.
Yeah. That's right. Like, I can imagine it would be difficult, like you say, for one of us to just be doing it and, like, to explain that.
Yeah. I think what I notice is that it's actually the other roles who are learning kind of as they go on. So being the engineer is the hardest in terms of, you've got to use your words to tell people what to do. Yeah. But on the other side of that, being the builder or the supplier, it's about trying to manage your frustrations, because if someone gives you a really vague instruction, you have to be quite clear and direct with what question you're answering or what question you're asking them. Yeah. So like, even to the extent of there's, I don't know the actual number, but there's so many different colours in the Lego range. So if you say yellow in the kit in front of you, there may be actually like 5 or 6 different types of yellow. Yeah. You've got lemon yellow, sunshine yellow, you've got all these different types of yellow. Yeah. If you're trying to find it and you're just like, what kind of yellow are you talking about?
So how far do you go towards engineering that kind of the scenario? Like, do you have your own? You don't just buy stuff off the shelf.
No, I do. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I buy the Lego kits just straight off the shelf.
Oh, okay. So they haven't got to a point where they're constructing sort of certain things, and there's levels of difficulty, or I suppose they're already. Lego has already done that.
Yeah, Lego already does that. Lego's great at, they've got stuff for 3-year-olds with the Duplo range, and they've got stuff for adults. Yeah. So I have a group who are really keen to engineer their own, but that requires a different kind of set of Lego. Like, you need to have a lot of kind of free building Lego, whereas I mainly have a lot of kits.
So the free building stuff, like, does that ever occur in a therapy session, or?
Yeah. That probably happens a little bit more in the individual session. Yeah. In individual sessions, so using Lego to tell stories, or using minifigures to show your family and show me your house and things like that. And it can be used in a group setting as well. Free building is really cool in terms of creativity. Yeah. But it is, in terms of constructing sets, it is quite hard. You need a lot of Lego.
And you have a specific purpose in mind. Like, you have a specific direction that you're wanting and goals to achieve throughout your sessions.
Yeah, so we kind of identify I identify usually with the parent or just with the young person what some goals are that they could be kind of working on. So for some people it's distress tolerance, so being able to ride out feelings of distress and feelings of frustration. And that we get real-time scenarios in Lego groups where they are really frustrated. There's times where I'm frustrated. and being able to kind of ride them out. So if there's a goal that we're working on specifically, I can sometimes get a bit creative. So if I'm in the group, I'll like hide Lego or purposefully give.
Wow.
Yeah, like purposefully give really vague instructions.
Yeah.
So I start to kind of do things on purpose.
Yes.
It needs to be monitored. It
Yeah,
needs
yeah.
to be.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go to the extreme of
No.
like flipping the Lego set or anything like that. But
Has that ever happened?
it's happened a couple of times. Yeah.
Well, it happens in lots of families
Yeah.
without the need.
Yeah.
So essentially, is this play? Is this kind of like around the sort of?
Yeah, it fits under a play-based therapy.
Yeah.
But I guess unlike other forms of play-based therapy, you can use Lego with adults. You can use it with teenagers. You can use it with kind of all ages. Whereas I think people, when they think of play-based therapy, they think of like quite younger people and sand and stuff like that. But the beauty of it is that it can be. You can use it with adults.
Yeah.
You can use it with teenagers who think nothing's cool enough for them. So
No. Yeah.
I mean, when you said, Milton, you be the supplier, I thought straight away, man, I want to be the engineer.
Yeah.
So you got to deal with accepting your role.
Yeah, you do, yeah. And that's a big thing that comes up every week.
I bet.
Every week is, there's the roles that people don't like. It's actually, I find the engineer is the role that nobody wants. So because it means that you've got to do a lot of talking, means you've got to do a lot of directing, you've got to have a level of critical thinking in terms of what you see in front of you. You've got to see people building things wrong or picking the wrong things when you've got the manual in front of you. I find that is probably the most difficult, and it's the one that people seem to not want. I love it. I love being the engineer because it means that I can give really vague instructions and get my clients to use their voice to ask me whatever questions they need to ask.
Well, I might jump over being the engineer, then realise, this is a bit harder than I thought.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
what would you want to be, Dave, out of that lot?
Possibly the builder. That's the one that I would be attracted to. But that's what I'd like to be. I mean, that's what I kind of am in life, I suppose, to a certain degree. Like, I'm one of those hands-on people.
Yeah.
With Sammy bags, like, I like actually making it and controlling it.
Yeah.
So, children, like regular old children, they're kind of, this is happening all the time at schools and homes around the country when kids play. Mm-hmm. They're experiencing those things. What is different about kids with autism that they need, like, rather than those environments, that they need a sort of another environment set up so that they can do that? Like, tell me a little bit about autism, because I'm not 100% sure, sometimes that definition has kind of changed. Well, I think it has maybe for people.
Yeah, so autism refers to Autism Spectrum Disorder, or ASD is what we kind of use. I don't think autism has changed as such, but it's more so people are being diagnosed with it now, and it's a lot more accepted, whereas I think 20, 30 plus years ago people would go their whole lives without knowing and would be referred to as quirky or highly strung or certain kind of characteristics. It hasn't really changed. It's just more accepted and more acknowledged now. Particularly the spectrum of it, because you can have people at one end who have higher support needs and are non-verbal and things like that, and then you can also have the other end, which previously was once referred to as the Asperger's kind of spectrum. And that term's not used anymore in New Zealand, but that sits under autism now. It's always sat under autism, but just the term Asperger's isn't
What
used.
other terms? I was looking online and I saw a couple of other ones pop up that I've heard about, like OCD.
OCD?
Yeah. Is that now, or is it kind of like a sub kind of...
No, OCD is that's a mental health diagnosis. So
Right.
OCD refers to obsessive compulsive disorder, and that sits under the anxiety disorders.
Right.
So it's sits under mental health, mental illness, rather than in the disability spectrum.
Yeah.
But
Because the categorizations of these things kind of matter, don't they?
At times they do. I mean, one of the biggest things about autism, an autism diagnosis, is that it sits under disability.
Yeah.
So in New Zealand, an autism diagnosis then would qualify for a needs assessment, which would qualify for some funding from the government most of the time. Sometimes it doesn't, but most of the time, which you can then fund certain supports.
Yeah. And I suppose one of the things, like popular culture, people started sort of referring to their own quirks as some of these definitions, like, that's just my OCD, when in reality they never had it, or they might say, self-diagnosed, I'm a little bit on the spectrum or something like that, and it kind of starts to lose its relevance and its kind of meaning, like real genuine meaning.
Yeah, I mean, I think people identifying kind of as they want. I guess it's up to them and how they use it, as long as they're not misusing it.
That's a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Or using it to, get out of something. Or, yeah.
So, and yesterday on the front page of the Press, there was an article all about how autistic children is sometimes being sent home from school because the teachers or the classrooms are unable to kind of deal with their behaviour, and they sort of said, well, it's not enough funding for teacher aides. What's your take on that? Like, where is that? That must be a concern for you.
Yeah, it's a huge concern for me. I mean, I work with children who aren't even in school, and 9, 10. Because the schools can't support them. Yeah. I did a really brief stint as a school counsellor a while ago, and it is incredibly difficult for schools. I mean, I didn't know until I went into that environment how difficult it is for schools to get teacher aid funding for young people, particularly when there's a trap in terms of social services in general, where if you fit in that moderate to severe range, you're often not entitled to a lot of support, but your needs are significantly higher than the normal kind of range.
Oh, okay.
It's the extremely severe that will be funded. Yeah. But it's that under that, like, severe or moderately severe, that often falls through the cracks. And so someone who's got, behavioural challenges, or significant behavioural challenges, but doesn't, tick enough boxes, isn't actually entitled to certain funding, particularly with teacher aid funding. Right.
So the kind of the bell curve of people don't necessarily, or behaviours and stuff doesn't fit the bell curve of the funding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an impossible system to navigate at times.
Oh man, I bet.
Like in the Press, where you've got young people who have significant needs, and the schools are kind of utilising as much as they can.
Yeah.
It's a difficult situation, and it falls back on the parents.
Yeah.
Not necessarily on how they act, but if the school can't handle a child, they'll say, hey, come pick your child up.
I think in that article in yesterday's Press, a lawyer was saying, it's actually illegal to send the kid home because they're not legally blameworthy. They're not really at fault for their behaviour.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know more about that.
Yeah, whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I noticed that the schools were only funded for like 40 hours for a whole year. For some of those teacher aides.
There's like a specific fund per school That's like the High Special Education Fund or something, along those lines. And it worked out to be like 60 cents per child per day or something like that. Or it was like incredibly low.
Yeah. Well, the government said at the end of the article that we are only providing assistance. We're not, we're not providing all the
60
money.
60 cents isn't much of
Well,
assistance.
that's some sort of assistance.
I
Isn't
guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's extremely minimal.
It's education at the moment is pretty dire.
Yeah. So what's happened in the past? Like, have children with autism always been a part of the regular kind of education system? Have they always been integrated in there and it's worked? And has it recently kind of broken down? Because are we seeing an increase in children with autism? And is that part of the problem? Or like, should they be separated out, or is it must be beneficial for them to be surrounded with regular activities and regular school?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, routine is kind of the best thing for any child. I don't think that there's need to properly look at research about rates. There may be more diagnosed kind of now, but I'm pretty sure it's more about actually diagnosis is being made rather than there's
people.
But I think what I saw a lot in the hospital system was that young people with autism just don't often fit in a modern learning environment. You've got like 90 kids or three classes in one big space. Lots of noise, lots of change. You've got changing of teachers, and teachers that don't necessarily know the children that well compared to a single cell class. Because if you think about that statistically, one teacher with 30 kids versus 3 teachers with 90 kids, they're going to do their best, but they're not going to know the child as well as if it was in a single cell. So those kind of factors and the environment often don't sit well with someone who's on the spectrum.
Yeah, and indeed, just any child, sometimes it's less, or like greater or less sort of suited to them.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's the dilemma, isn't it, of education in general, because as we know, there's trends.
Yeah.
And we do this for 20 years, and then new people come in and they say this is the latest research, and they switch back.
And a couple of schools, I've also read in the newspaper.
Yeah.
Wow, I guess are moving back away from those.
Switching back
to the cells.
Yeah, Rangiora High, I think, is one that's been in the news recently, and they're switching back.
Right.
From modern learning to the single cell. Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean. I
remember reading in I think it was the Chronicles of Narnia. There's a Professor Kirk, and he was talking about modern learning in the education system, like way back then, and how it's called progressive, but it didn't quite cut the mustard. So it's not a new thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how it's kind of justified, continue to be justified. Like, there's so many children that struggle. School attendance rates at the moment is awful, and it's kind of constantly in the news about how poor attendance is nationwide. It just baffles me that it kind of continues. They continue to build modern learning schools, and
I wonder if it's so what would a sort of a fairy tale kind of solution be for children with autism?
I think the single cell environment is usually a bit better suited. Not just with autism, but quite a lot of neurodiversity like ADHD as well. Just having the more kind of contained structure.
Is that under the autism umbrella?
No, there's massive overlap between the two. But ADHD refers to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and that is it's a neurodiversity, but it sits a little bit more under mental health. So there's massive overlaps between the two, but they're two separate diagnoses.
Okay, cool. Is it a class as a disability? Do they receive funding?
No, it sits under mental health in New Zealand.
Right.
Yeah, in other parts of the world, they sit together. Like they both sit under one category, but for some reason in New Zealand, they are.
And that's the key to funding or not funding. Yeah. So going back to single cell, do you call it? Yeah.
I think for a lot of neurodiverse kids, that environment suits a lot better. Yeah. I mean, in an ideal world, smaller classes. Yeah. Trained teachers specifically in dealing with, neurodiversity or behaviour management if needed. It's a tricky one. It is a really, really tricky one.
And currently, when a parent brings their child to you, do they receive funding for that, or do they have to front up with that themselves?
Both.
Both.
Both. So a lot of my clients have individualised funding, so that's through what we'd call LifeLink. So they do the assessment and kind of provide a certain amount of funding. So lots of my clients have individualised funding, and they can use their funding, which has actually been in the news recently as well, about there was a big crackdown on the use of funding.
Oh, right.
The minister got in trouble for it. Yeah. Whatever her name was.
Is this like a 60 cents funding thing, or is it more substantial than that?
No, it's more substantial.
Oh, good.
More substantial. And the idea is that it can be used. It can be used for supports that a young person has or needs. So, Lego therapy kind of sits into that if they want to use it for that. But it can also fit into like the respite kind of category. So the young person would be funded to go and spend, a weekend with a family member, and that family member would be paid, kind of thing. Yeah. So it's great for that. But I also have other clients that just fund privately. They don't receive any funding, and they'll be in that moderate to severe kind of range as well. But just don't meet the criteria for any funding, so the families will privately pay.
And tell us about some scenarios where kids like had their improvements and stuff. Like, tell us some like what happens to a kid when they start the therapy. And do they sort of complete the course, or is it kind of ongoing, or?
It can definitely be ongoing. There are some kind of recommended timelines around like groups and things like that. But the individual clients, they can kind of come as long as they want. And what I often see, and what I see for long-term clients, is that the role kind of shifts, and that the Lego is used not as kind of rigidly as it once was, and it's used more as a connection tool. So we'll just build sets together. Like I've got a client who like really loves Harry Potter, and we just like are burning through all the Harry Potter sets, and it's just moved into a little bit more of a counselling kind of role, where we're just using the Lego as a tool to connect, giving them something to do, and we build it collaboratively.
Cool.
Which I think, coming back to a question you asked earlier, which I'm not sure if I actually answered,
That's okay.
The difference, I think, between building a Lego set at home or at school versus building it in the environment at my office, is that it's the difference between building it on your own, where you've got full control, to building it with at least one other person, which becomes a lot harder. It's like, Milton, like baking. If you introduce a second person, and
100%,
and you've got to do it collaboratively, it just becomes
the dynamic has massively changed. For sure.
And there's just so much to be learnt from that, and that because simply because someone can't say, well, if you had a boss or a work colleague that just kept on saying, no, let me do it, I'll show you how to do it, and never, ever let the other person, what's that saying? If you want a job done properly, do it yourself, type of thing.
Yeah.
That attitude just isn't going to
fly.
It's not going to work for anyone long term. It's just going to burn people out and all sorts.
Yeah, that other person's just negated, and
Yeah.
the control is just maybe micromanaging and lacking trust and all that. I mean, you're just dealing with so many issues.
Well, and there's a straight off the bat assumption that other people can't do it as well as what you can, which is such a ridiculous thing.
Yeah, that's totally ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, before we were talking about the engineer and the supplier and the builder, I mean, people deal with that dynamic every day at their work.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely do.
Yeah. So what are some of the changes that you see, and are they kind of like long lasting?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest ones that I like to see and that I work really hard to see is around distress tolerance. So, I'll have a young person come in, and if we're building quite a difficult set, like I've had Lego thrown at the wall, I've had Lego thrown down the stairs, I've had Lego, I have never had it thrown at me, which is good, still respectful.
Yeah.
But, I've had it thrown. To then be able to complete a whole set with nothing being thrown, and a really hard set. Like there's some sets like the Technic sets, which are, I don't know if you know what the Technic sets are, but they're like very finicky.
Right.
Lots of little pipes that you have to put in specific places and stuff.
Yeah.
And they are incredibly difficult. And we've got young people completing them without having any...
Yeah. And is that in the group situation or sometimes...
Both, both. The other one that I really love to see is confidence. So seeing real-time confidence being built. We see school going really well, we see social situations going really well, connection in the groups or connection individually. I always love it when I've built a rapport with a young person and they say something, or like volunteer some kind of personal information or some personal dilemma that they're in with me, because it just shows that actually we're building a rapport here. We're building trust, and they see me as a safe person. Yeah, which is a huge benefit.
That's cool. So at that point, it's just not at all about the Lego, is it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably, in some ways it's never about the Lego, but still.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I'll slow it down, if a young person says something to me. Yeah. I'll slow it down and kind of get into it a little bit more, so I'll just pause any kind of Lego building that we're doing and pretend to find a piece when I know where it is or I've hidden it, and really get more.
I hope they're not listening to this podcast, Kezia.
Yeah, I'm terrible at hiding them. I'll have it in my hand and I'll be pretending to look for it.
Oh. Yeah.
That reminded me of that in the military where those sorts of exercises are also set up to stress out the guys and see their reactions.
Yeah.
Where it's a no-win situation and seeing how people will react.
Yeah.
I was trying to buy a T-shirt the other day from the US, which they don't ship to New Zealand, but it said microdose adversity. And I suppose there's a little bit of overlap because some people think microdosing, hallucinogenics kind of benefits people. But microdosing adversity to build up that resilience, that baseline of resilience. Yeah. I thought it was kind of cool. And so regulation...
Yeah, emotional regulation.
Yeah, self-regulation is one of the key things that you're kind of...
Yeah, huge.
And tell us about that. Is that something that you can kind of build up and it stays? Or does it kind of do you need to go to the gym? Is it kind of like muscle? Does it waste away after time? And I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you don't use your skills, they would.
They will.
They would, yeah. But what we want to see is people using their skills, and often what we see is when someone builds their emotional regulation skills, they become confident in themselves and their ability to kind of handle things, and so it's a benefit to someone, so they'll continue to use them. I think when we think about ASD or neurodiversity and not having distress tolerance or emotional regulation skills, no one wants to have meltdowns or kind of explosive episodes. No one wants to have that. It's not fun for them as well. And so I think in the context of schools, it's seen as a behavioural thing, but actually that young person doesn't want to be doing that. It's just that they don't have the skills that they need to handle the adversity that's right in front of them, or handle whatever it is that's going on for them.
Cool. I mean, that's a really cool point, because it's like these kids are no different to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we would prefer not to have a, meltdown on the street, wouldn't we, if the weather changes? We'd prefer just to put our umbrella up or put our coat on. But for some people on the spectrum, that is, the change in temperature is enough to, cause dysregulation.
Right.
But they don't necessarily have the skills to be able to handle it.
So is it kind of similar to what just you or I would experience? Perhaps if we, is it a case of identifying it and then sort of working out your response? Is it sort of similar to that?
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes learning how to match a physical feeling with an emotion.
Yeah.
Sometimes learning how to disconnect a physical feeling from an emotion. Like nausea is a big one that, sometimes you're nauseous because you're actually unwell, and sometimes you're nauseous because you're anxious, and being able to distinguish between the two. Physical experiences or somatic experiences are really big in the space that I'm working with. So trying to teach people to connect any kind of physical discomfort with an emotion, and then normalising the emotion. Everyone experiences frustration, everyone experiences this, and then what's the skill to be able to deal with it? And sometimes that skill is simply recognising it will pass, and sometimes it's something else that's needed in terms of distraction, or taking your mind off something for a bit until you feel better, or talking to someone. Which is like you say, it's no different to you or I. So if I was a parent and I had a young child with autism, what would you say to that parent? Is it kind of do parents these days have a sense of kind of doom, or kind of like, oh crap, our child isn't going to have a life that's as good as other children, and that type of thing? What is the outlook? I don't see a lot of doom.
No.
I mean, it probably...
Sorry, look, Kezia, I don't know anything about autism, I'm just sort of throwing out questions.
Well, in that newspaper article yesterday, so the parents were... Two of the parents were saying, I'm scared my kid's going to be at home forever.
Yeah. I think with that higher support need, I can imagine that some parents are feeling quite burnt out.
Yeah.
And at a bit of a wit's end.
Yeah.
I don't see those children a lot. I see kind of the ones a little bit under it. Potentially because they're in another service, or they're somewhere else. But in the parents that I see, it's more about what I try and do with them is try and shift that view, like I said before, where if there's a behaviour happening that you don't like, it's not necessarily because the person wants to be misbehaving or annoying you or anything like that. It's because they are experiencing something that's really uncomfortable for them.
So in that situation, if a child is going to become upset about a temperature change or a weather change, what's going on for that child?
So for some people on the spectrum, the ability to regulate yourself physically is quite difficult. So like recognizing if you're hot or you're cold, taking a layer off, like it's a physical sensitivity that is quite difficult for them. So like being hot is one that is often really uncomfortable, like if it's hot outside, but they like wearing something really tight because they like the feeling of that on their skin and like feeling like protected. And then you go outside and it's blaring hot. It's really uncomfortable because they're at a bit of a fork in the road. Do they take their top off and then not like the feeling on their skin? Do they suffer through the heat? So that ability to regulate becomes quite difficult.
So it's being quite hyper aware of those feelings and emotions in their body.
Yeah. I mean, so there's a lot of sensory difficulties with people on the spectrum and other neurodiversities as well. But, even like sometimes going to the mall can be really hard because of all the noise, all the people, the bright lights. So we look at the 5 kind of senses, and often you'll see people on the spectrum are really sensitive to some of those sensory inputs. Which also then comes back down to why school can be difficult.
Yeah, totally. There's kids in my daughter's class and son's class, with the headphones to reduce sound, and I don't know, some of them, I think there's some things that some of the kids chew as well. And I can't think of any of the other ones.
Because you can be over-seeking or under-seeking. So, you can be sensitive to noise, for example, and need something like noise cancelling headphones to be able to relax or focus or whatnot. But then you can also be the other end where you need a lot of noise to be able to focus or to be able to relax.
Wow. That's probably more uncommon, is it, or not? Maybe not.
It's probably.
Yeah.
No,
it's 50-50.
Yeah.
Who knows? Some people probably are quite happy with music playing in the background and also studying, for example.
Yeah, I was just thinking that when I think back to my study days, like I had a lot of friends who would be able to study better in a cafe,
right,
rather than at home or at a library because they needed the noise or the background noise. Same with like smell. Some people will be oversensitive to perfume, soaps, detergents. But then other people like love perfume, love the smell of the smell of things. Totally. That's all stuff that I have to be really careful of in my office. Is that don't have like a really strong smell.
Totally.
Because if I've got someone who's really sensitive to smell and they come in and they're like, what's this?
I used to hate working in factories, and people would have this freaking radio blaring all day. Man, that was awful. Just with this awful radio stations just blabbing full of ads and stuff. That used to drive me crazy. But your dad likes working in the piece, like when he's helping you out making semi bags sometimes. He likes not having the music on or a podcast or whatever.
It
right?
depends. Probably.
But I could relate to that, but I also like having the music blaring sometimes as well.
Yeah, and sometimes I've got a couple of clients who like quiet unless it's their own music, and then it's fine loud. But it's because it's a choice thing. It's their music. It's relaxing.
There's
so many ways you can slice that up.
That's right. Nathan McGregor, we had a guy called Nathan McGregor on, and he talks about using some of these different things to alter or change your state. Essentially. So if you're wanting to, and we all do it kind of, like you say, we might put on a particular type of music to get amped up and to, really get into that zone and work hard. And other times we might use music to calm ourselves down. So you steal Lego pieces off of to alter to give those children an experience. To just a little flavour of it coming through. And being able to then work instantly on whatever it is that's coming up. So
I need to be really careful about, you know, what I'm doing, and I would never do it to someone who doesn't have a level of some regulation.
Yeah.
But you know,
so you're closely watching what's needed.
Yeah.
In what tool I've got.
Yeah, and you know, if it's the first time I'm doing it, it'll be for a couple of seconds, and then I'll be like, oh, there it is.
Yes.
You know, there it is. Whereas if it's someone that I've had for a long time, I'll throw it on the other side of the room, and when they're not looking, and then, you know, it'll take us ages to find it. Or I won't ever give it back to them, and I'll
that's the ultimate.
Yeah, or I'll just hide it, and then we're using skills like, okay, well, what can we do instead? Because, you know, sometimes the answer's not always there, and you've got to think on the spot. So
you're right.
True. So, you know, we'll think about, okay, what else can we use? Can we use a different colour? Do we need that? Is that, you know, a pivotal point in the set?
Yeah.
So there's so many opportunities to kind of deal with situations, and if a parent is telling me something specific about a child, you know, like, oh, they're really struggling at school with this, like with dealing with this specific thing, if I can work on it in sessions, then I absolutely will.
Cool. That's I listened to a podcast with a guy recently. I don't remember his name, but he had created an organisation called letgrow.org, and it was about giving children responsibility, like age-appropriate responsibility. And there was just like a little video clip with the kids talking about how it had helped them and stuff. And, you know, some of them had walked their brother to school, or they might have baked a cake, or they might have made breakfast for their parents or something like that. And it's not just, so it's giving the kid this responsibility and kind of allowing them to be able to fail in a safe environment.
Yeah.
And it was really funny hearing the kids, because they were like, I baked a cake. And then, you know, after a wee while you hear all the good stories, and then they say, well, how did the cake turn out? And then she's like, wow, not so good. I tried to put the icing on and it freaking went everywhere. And then, but that teaches the kids something as well. It's not about producing a perfect cake.
Yeah.
It's about the journey getting there, and having a plan B or having a plan C, or what am I going to do next time? And realising that it's not all over, kind of, just because.
Yeah, sometimes children with neurodiversities, they have a bit of a, what we'd call like a black and white thinking mentality, where it's kind of all or nothing. You know, it's either going to go well, or it's not going to go well at all, and it's going to flop. Whereas, you know, life is much more kind of in the grey area, where things can go kind of well, or things can go kind of bad, or things can just go okay. And so, I mean, similar to that, that's a lot of what we talk about in session is, you know, maybe it's okay just for it to be okay.
Totally.
It's about the journey. It's about learning new skills. It's about what did you take from that experience that, you know, can mean that next time something different happens.
And these same things are present in everyday normal life.
Yeah. Like
business owners, you know, this idea that we need to constantly succeed. Social media has played into that, because it's like a highly edited version of people's lives, where only the success is on display.
Well, often people are just selling stuff as well.
Well, yeah, true.
Yeah.
Don't even get me started on social media. It is the bane of our
culture.
Yeah, the well-being of youth. It's awful.
Yeah.
Absolutely awful.
What would be your parameters around the use of it?
I mean,
like why is it? Yeah, maybe get started a wee bit on that.
I won't stop. It is social media is such a dangerous place for youth, for being influenced in terms of what they're seeing, what they think is normal, the bullying that happens online, but it's more so about seeing, what people are putting out in this perfectly crafted kind of image of themselves. And so, you know, when you've got young people who are seeing all these positive things, they then, you know, look inwards and say, oh, well, what am I not doing right? Or what am I doing that's not...
It's this constant thing, I'm no good, I'm garbage, all that sort of stuff.
Well, it's worse than fiction, because before social media, when you had an author who wrote a fiction book, usually there was an element of truth about it, like Charles Dickens. You know, there's all the different characters, there's all the good things, there's the bad things. It's actually not a bad representation of life, whereas social media is fiction, but it's just a really... It's even a pretty crap version of fiction.
Yeah.
It's an abstraction away from reality. It's very, sick and saccharine. If you fall for that, you're in trouble.
Yeah. When I was on when I was working on the eating disorders ward, I did I got asked to do some research and a presentation to the staff about how social media impacts young people with eating disorders, or how social media can influence eating disorders. And I can't quite remember the statistics of it, but there was a lot of research to suggest that social media makes eating disorders worse. So, you know, if you've got the genetic vulnerabilities to it and you're experiencing some of the other things, being on social media and exposing yourself to certain, you know, things on social media can perpetuate eating disordered behaviour. Yeah,
I've heard about that. I've heard the body types which are just in nature are just so uncommon. Was it called thick, thin or something? I can't remember. But a woman who is like, you know, curvy in all the right places and thin in all the right places, but it's almost a just doesn't happen in nature unless you're
it's just one of those things that, you know, beauty standards are constantly changing. So you know, what's being kind of advertised now is like a beauty standard people are trying to strive for, but it's not the beauty standard that was 30 years ago. But social media just perpetuates all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Where you would have seen it in a magazine or seen it in the newspaper or something.
So that's a massive driver for anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah, particularly social-based anxiety.
Yeah,
or performance-based anxiety.
And trying to keep up with the change and...
Yeah, trying to stay relevant.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. It's bizarre. I saw it the other day, which was be bold, be you, be something or other else. But it's for hair dye. So, I mean, straight off the bat, the kids dyeing their hair blue or green, like they're not comfortable with themselves, their natural hair colour. And it's kind of like, what's the message here? I just find that stuff bizarre. I don't know. I mean, I know it's just like you say, they're selling something, right?
Yeah, but I mean, people just dye their hair for fun and just do...
Well, that's right. I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but I just feel like there's a message there that is also kind of not particularly helpful.
With the advertiser's message, they're saying, in order to be bold and be strong...
And be yourself.
You've got to use our stuff in order to be yourself.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So consumerism kind of drives some of these cultural kind of things.
Yeah.
Like there's this stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's just to make a buck.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, you see like recently the rise of the Ugg boot again.
No way, serious?
Yeah, the rise of the Ugg boot.
Oh, wow.
And that's just because like it's come around again. Someone's probably promoted it.
Yeah.
But you'll see young people wearing Ugg boots again.
Some things are just timeless. That's eternal.
I mean, that brand, I Love Ugly. Does Ugg stand for ugly? I don't know if it does. Maybe not.
Oh,
I don't know.
Maybe it means like prehistoric, like Ugg. You used to wear Ugg boots in the caves or
true.
something.
Maybe.
Don't know.
It's funny though, because you see it and it's a different version of an Ugg boot. Like it's a short Ugg boot with a big platform. But you know that that's come around again, and that is absolutely a consumerism thing.
Yes.
True.
Damn. Wow. And now Milton was talking before about what was the acceptance and
Oh, the acceptance commitment therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, is it's a form of behavioural therapy, kind of like cognitive behavioural therapy. It's kind of sit under that. It's just something that, like when I was training in therapy, it's the one that I kind of got drawn to the most. So there's different types of talking therapy. There's CBT, DBT, mindfulness-based
What's
strategies.
the DBT?
DBT is dialectical behavioural therapy. So there's lots of different types of therapy. Different therapists will kind of specialise in whatever works for them a little bit better. I find ACT, or acceptance and commitment therapy, the best for me personally, because I really align with what kind of ACT teaches, which is around values and living by your values, particularly because I'm working with younger people who who often don't seem to have strong values, or their values change because of their peer group or whatnot. So I really strongly align myself with ACT.
Values are not sold on billboards around town.
No.
Be yourself, be bold.
So my partner, she read that book called The Happiness Trap.
Oh, yeah. By is he Dr. Russ Harris? Yeah. I really like Russ Harris.
He used to be a medical doctor.
Yeah.
And he thought, I'm doing all this stuff, I'm a medical doctor, I've got status, I've got money, I'm not happy. What's going on?
Yeah. So the Happiness Trap is a book by Russ Harris. I'm not sure. I think he is a doctor. He's a medical doctor. I don't know if he's got his PhD, but he's a doctor, Russ Harris. And I think he has a couple of books, but The Happiness Trap is probably his most successful. And it is essentially, he talks about what it sounds like, that happiness, striving for happiness is a trap, because happiness is only an emotion that you're meant to feel briefly. You're not meant to feel it all of the time, because it's just not how life works. There's a lot of monotonous parts about life. And I really like that, and I really strongly align with that, like that, coming back to that black and white thing. Life is so much more in the grey. Yeah. And that's the same with emotions. That's the same with how we experience life. Like, there's a lot of the grey part of life that is just okay.
Yeah, we often talk about that at work. If you're unhappy or whatever, that's fine. If you're in pain, it's just part of life.
Yeah.
It changes and moves on, but the whole lot is just part of it all. So, once you accept that, it just makes things a little bit easier.
Yeah.
So you're not scared of being scared, or scared of anxious about being anxious, or whatever. Yeah. So forth.
Yeah, I often refer to the happiness trap, and I will actually say that the happiness trap, when I've got someone in front of me who's saying like, oh well, when I can do this, I'll be happy, or when I was an eating disorder, it was weight based. Like, when I'm at this weight, I'll be happy. Or now I see, hearing and seeing all sorts of things that when a young person achieves that, they think they'll be happy. But it's just not. It's just not doable, and I will say that to them pretty frankly. Like, that's a bit of a trap to think that you'll be happy for a brief moment when you've achieved whatever goal that is, but you can't actually sustain that feeling of happiness for a long time.
Yeah, and there's consequences. Like, the trap doesn't like, if it was like, you could take it further and you could say, well, the trap actually kind of catches you and it kind of causes damage. Like, you don't just kind of fall into it and not receive any damage. It's there's an ongoing issue and there's a problem. Like, it's not just a so do you stick basically with kids with autism, or are you beginning to see other children who don't fall under that disability thing coming and trying to deal with these problems as well, who simply are missing out, or like on the self-regulation or the emotional regulation? They don't perhaps have a grasp, and is that good for them, like, to receive the same kind of counselling that maybe someone with autism would receive?
Yeah, so I do see children and young people too, like I see young adults as well, who don't fit onto that autism, into that kind of spectrum. But they'll come through from like Mike King's organisation, I Am Hope.
Oh, yeah.
Or some ACC clients, or just private referrals.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can't take anybody new on, like I'm pretty full most of the time. But if I've got a space, or we can make something work, we'll make it work. But yeah, definitely. And I'll try if they like Lego, I'll use Lego. But if they don't like Lego, they're just coming for some skills, then we'll probably not go near it.
Yeah, for sure.
Is autism like a symptom of our modern age, or has it always been around and undiagnosed? Or is there more people with it these days?
There's quite a bit of research to say that it's always been around. It's just being diagnosed and accepted more. Okay. Yeah. So if you look at a young person with autism and there's no family history of it, there often is, some notable characters in the family who experience some difficulties. Yeah. That would align, like it is a genetic. Most of the time, it's a genetic. You've got a genetic vulnerability.
Yeah, because I did a brief Google on it and stuff, and some people even seem to like change their diets and stuff to perhaps try to improve it. Do you look into any of that type of thing, or I don't. No. It's kind of.
It's just a bit out of my scope.
Yeah, and look, plenty of people have amazing diets and.
Yeah. It's just a bit out of my scope, but I know there is dietitians and things like that who specialise in certain things. When there's an overlap with other diagnoses,
it's more relevant.
Yeah, or when there's what we call ARFID, which is an eating.
Oh yes, I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's actually an eating disorder diagnosis. It's avoidant restricted food intake disorder.
Yeah. And
that can overlap with autism or ADHD around like certain textures, certain flavours. But ARFID, the diagnosis is kind of to the extreme, so there's often no rhyme or reason, like someone will only eat 5 different types of food kind of thing. And so, sometimes diet comes into that aspect of things.
Yeah.
Because there's, avoidant eating. Or,
there's an obvious problem. Yep.
Yes, yeah. Yep. And I do always say in those situations to my clients, when the young person's not eating very much, like actually, they need to be eating more. We need to look at dietetic support and stuff like that. Yeah. So I guess yes, there is some. Yeah. So it does affect.
But it's not as if it's like looking for a cure through diet.
No. Yeah. It's trying to not regress certain difficulties.
Anything that's kind of dysregulated or whatever needs to be kind of brought into a regulation and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there may be some research. I think that one of the professors at the University of Canterbury is doing, Julia Ruckledge, I think might be doing research, but I'm not sure if it's specific around autism or more around mental health.
Oh, yeah.
Around like intake.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, in the gut and stuff. Cool. So you love keeping up with all the latest articles and stuff that's coming out?
Yeah, most of the time. Yeah, if I see it come through, I'll read it. Particularly anything kind of neurodiverse or trauma related. Yeah. Try and keep myself as up to date, and I kind of have to. It sits in my professional registration anyway around development and stuff like that.
Cool. That's my favourite doctors when you go there and they go, I've just read an article about this and that.
Oh, totally.
You know they're into what they're doing and not just clipping the ticket.
Yeah. And you don't want that information to take 20 years to reach people who are on the front line, right? Yeah. You want them to be up to date with it all. I met a guy called Professor Roger Mulder in Christchurch, who is at the university, and he wrote an amazing article about borderline personality disorder, and he deals with these classifications and stuff. And man, it was just so amazing reading this article that he wrote or co-wrote. And it's just massively empowering, because it's almost like they're catching up with what the patients potentially already knew. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, I shouldn't be labelled with this. And then they've kind of said, yeah, this is actually totally not fair, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a professional sense. He said it better than that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But I like that article because he was, you could relate to it. It wasn't in academic language and all that sort of stuff. It was quite down to earth and relatable.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah, it was massively empowering. Yeah, for people who have struggled with, doctors perhaps almost even rolling their eyes at people because there's a certain thing written on their record, and it's just not really. Yeah, it's kind of a abnormality or something. It shouldn't really be. Have the presence that it's been given.
Yeah, it can definitely have a bit of a black mark kind of against it as a diagnosis, for sure.
So where are we at? Like, what are you hoping for? Like, with that article in the press, schools are struggling.
Yeah.
What is some ways forward? Like, is it just a case of more money or more funding? That would presumably help.
There's a lot that needs to change in terms of young people with behavioural challenges. But I mean, at the very least, I'd love to see a review around education.
Yeah.
And how to support young people in school and keep them in school as well, because it does seem like there is a lot of young people not in school at the moment, or not in regular school.
Yeah, and that isolation is just, anyone can work out that that's not going to be good for people.
Yeah.
Which, if it's not good for people, it's not good for society. Yeah, we can't afford to just, it's like a them problem, not a us problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would love to see a little bit more support for that, like I was talking about, that kind of moderate to severe range of young people. I'd love to see more support available for that range, because, they often don't meet criteria for certain services, and so they can't access support in that arena, and so it has to be privately funded or whatnot. I would just love to see more in that, because that's the preventative space. That's where we can do things before it gets really awful, before the family or the young person's at a crisis.
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
That space where people fall through the cracks, they, often while they're falling through the cracks, they're not really noticed.
Yeah.
They're just lost in the system.
And that's often what we see happen is, when the behaviours are flaring up, they're not quite severe enough for any service or agency, public service or agency, to pick them up, and so they'll progressively get worse in terms of their behaviour or in terms of their mental health, and then by the time they're seen, it's a year later or a year and a bit later, and their behaviour's gotten out of hand, and they're no longer in school, and they're doing this and they're doing that, and it's like the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff.
Totally. Yeah, it's accumulative. Yeah, and it's you fall through a small crack at the top, but at the bottom, it's a great big mess. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a lack of basic common sense, really.
Yeah.
That's right. So much of it is. You must be pleased with the ban on cell phones in high schools and stuff like that.
Yeah, I do think that's great.
Yeah.
There's probably some times where it would be helpful, like for a young person, if they're doing half days or something like that. But yeah, I think it's great. It was a real problem for sure.
Cool. Thanks, Kezia, for coming in.
Thanks, Kezia.
Thanks for having me.
Telling us all about it, because like I say, I don't really know a whole lot about it all.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating, and it's interesting seeing that overlap between autism and just other problems that are present in society and how, you know, we're struggling with it regardless. Yeah.
It feels like quite a timely time to come in with, you know, all everything that's been in the news lately, and all of the kind of reviews, the change in government, how that's affected everybody. It'd be interesting to see how the next, you know, couple of years plays out for some of these quite vulnerable families with the new government.
I know of a few people who have lost their jobs recently due to the layoffs and so forth, you know, and you have to have a capacity for resilience and all that sort of thing to deal with that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it does seem like a bit of a tough time. Like there's, you know, lots of the public service agencies are trying their best, but are, you know, swamped. Like when I was at the hospital, there was like over a year wait list for.
That's right.
Cases.
There's all these broken things, like, and we talk about it, but unless it affects us, we don't really know.
Yeah. And then you find out, and you're like, wait, there's a how long's the wait list?
Yeah.
And so
it must just be so incredibly frustrating for anyone having to navigate that, because it's just there's a lack of, you know, hope and like actual real kind of leadership in that area. That's what there needs to be. But yeah, for whatever reason, I don't know. Well, hopefully there's, I don't know, maybe, do you think there's room for, like, other people to spring up, like private things to kind of spring up?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely what I'm seeing in terms of my peers and my colleagues. There's a lot of private people, and when you know look online, they're often really full up, and I think people are kind of paying. They're paying if they have to. It's the families that can't afford to pay that are the more kind of tricky ones. But I think there is, and there's certainly room for, you know, like the mana aki teams who work in schools. They do some pretty cool work, and things like that, like the social services there's lots of agencies out there who are doing, you know, what they can with the resources that they can.
Yeah. We had someone on here the other day. We need to wrap this up, but we had someone on here the other day, Kieran from Photosynthesis. He has a photography studio, and they, you know, commercial people pay for it, and that payment from the commercial thing helps fund all of the other like artists and other people, so that becomes subsidised for people who are doing certain works. Are there any systems in the mental health space where that kind of thing goes on? So, say people that can afford to go privately, and that offsets perhaps people that can't afford to go privately.
Yeah, well, I take one cohort client on at a time.
Yeah.
Because
that's cool.
Business-wise, I need to kind of have a business.
Of course.
I personally take one cohort client on at a time, and you know when they finish up, we'll take another one on. Gumboot Friday fund a couple of sessions for families, and sometimes the therapist may kind of agree to do an extra session or two. Or ACC, sometimes you can get funding through ACC if it's, you know, injury or accident related, but it's really up to the private therapist with what they offer.
It sounds like you could almost do, or like the families could almost do with like corporate sponsorship and funding. Like, wouldn't that just be a neat way to actually give back to the community? Yeah,
I think some workplaces have the employee assistance programs. I'd be interested to know whether that extends to the children. Like I know it would extend to the employee and maybe their partner, but whether that extends to the children, that would be
cool.
That would be really cool,
because the well-being of, you know, it just makes sense. It's common sense, like Milton says.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Kezia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll give you the menu, and you can order some breakfast.
Thank you.
We've got 5 minutes to open now.
Okay, I better switch it off.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks.
thanks.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.